The email notification chimed at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I knew before opening it that my life was about to shatter. Zara, we need to talk first thing tomorrow morning. Come to the executive conference room at 8 a.m. sharp. It was from Marcus. Brennan, the man I'd trusted with my career, my innovations, and foolishly, my heart. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What I discovered the next morning would destroy everything. I thought I knew about loyalty, but it would also become the foundation for something far greater than I could have ever imagined. 3 years earlier, I had walked into NeuroTech Solutions in Austin with nothing but a computer science degree from UT and an algorithm that I was convinced could revolutionize financial predictions. The sleek glass building in the heart of Austin's tech corridor felt like stepping into the future. Marcus Brennan, the chief technology officer, had been the one to interview me. He was 15 years older, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of confidence that came from building successful companies from the ground up. When I explained my predictive analytics concept during that first meeting, his eyes had lit up in a way that made me feel like I'd finally found someone who understood my vision. "This could change everything," he had said, leaning forward across the polished conference table. "The financial markets have been waiting for something like this. Traditional prediction models are stuck in the past. But what you're describing, this adaptive learning system that evolves with market behavior, this is the future." His enthusiasm had been intoxicating, and when he offered me a position as senior algorithm developer with equity options and the promise that my predictive flow system would be the cornerstone of NeuroTech's next major product launch, I thought I'd won the lottery. Dylan Cross, the CEO and founder of NeuroTech, had been equally impressed during my presentation to the executive team. He was younger than Marcus, probably early 30s, with the kind of polished charm that made him equally comfortable in boardrooms and tech conferences. Zara's algorithm represents exactly the kind of innovation that will keep NeuroTech ahead of the competition, he had announced to the room full of VPs and department heads. "I want this prioritized above all other projects. Give her whatever resources she needs." The validation had felt incredible. After years of professors dismissing my ideas as too ambitious and other companies passing on my applications, I finally had a platform to prove what I was capable of achieving. Natalie Pierce, who headed the machine learning division, had been assigned as my primary collaborator. She was brilliant in her own right, with a PhD from Stanford and a reputation for turning complex theoretical concepts into practical applications. Initially, our working relationship had been productive. She understood the technical complexities of what I was trying to accomplish and had valuable insights about implementation strategies. "Your core algorithm is solid," she had told me during one of our early brainstorming sessions. "But we need to think about scalability and real-time processing. The financial markets won't wait for calculations to catch up." Her feedback had been genuinely helpful, and I had appreciated having someone with her experience to bounce ideas off of. The development process had consumed nearly 2 years of 16-hour days, countless iterations, and more failed prototypes than I cared to remember. My algorithm wasn't just a simple prediction model. It was a sophisticated artificial intelligence system that could analyze thousands of market variables simultaneously, learn from its own mistakes, and adapt its predictions in real time as market conditions changed. Traditional financial prediction software looked at historical data and tried to project future trends based on past patterns. Predictive flow was fundamentally different because it could recognize when market conditions were shifting and adjust its analytical approach accordingly. The breakthrough had come during a particularly brutal 3-week period when I had basically lived in the office, surviving on energy drinks and takeout while debugging a complex neural network integration. The algorithm had been producing accurate predictions for stable market conditions, but it kept failing during periods of high volatility. The solution had hit me at 4 a.m. while I was staring at lines of code that had started to blur together. Instead of trying to predict volatility, the algorithm needed to recognize volatility patterns and switch between different analytical frameworks depending on market behavior. It was like teaching the system to recognize when the rules of the game had changed and adapt its strategy accordingly. Marcus had been there for every milestone, every breakthrough, and every frustrating setback. He would bring coffee during late-night coding sessions and offer encouragement when I was ready to give up. Revolutionary technology isn't built in comfortable 40-hour weeks, he would remind me when I was particularly exhausted. What you're creating here is going to change how financial institutions approach risk assessment and investment strategy. This is bigger than just NeuroTech, Zara. This is going to be your legacy. His support had meant everything to me, especially during the periods when I questioned whether the algorithm would ever work as intended. Our professional relationship had gradually evolved into something more personal. Marcus had a way of making me feel like the most brilliant person in the room, and his experience in the tech industry provided guidance that I desperately needed as a young developer trying to navigate corporate politics. When he started inviting me to dinner after particularly long work sessions, it had felt natural. When those dinners turned into weekend conversations about everything beyond work, I had convinced myself that this was what adult relationships looked like. He was divorced, I was single, and we shared a passion for technology that made our connection feel inevitable. The first successful test of predictive flow had been a moment I would never forget. We had been granted permission to run the algorithm against 6 months of historical market data to see how accurately it could predict actual outcomes. Traditional prediction software typically achieved accuracy rates between 60 and 70% under optimal conditions. Predictive flow had consistently predicted market movements with 87% accuracy, even during periods of significant volatility. Marcus had actually shouted with excitement when we saw the results. "Do you understand what this means?" he had asked, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than strictly professional protocol would suggest. "This doesn't just beat the competition. This makes the competition obsolete." Dylan had been equally thrilled when we presented the test results to the executive team. "This is exactly what we needed to secure the Henderson Industries contract," he had declared, referring to a potential partnership with one of the largest investment firms in the country. "They've been looking for next-generation predictive analytics, and this is generations ahead of anything else on the market." The Henderson contract was worth potentially $500 million over 5 years, and my algorithm was positioned to be the centerpiece of that deal. The months leading up to the official product launch had been intense but exciting. I had been working with the marketing team to develop technical specifications for client presentations. Natalie had been handling the integration protocols that would allow predictive flow to interface with existing financial software systems. Marcus had been coordinating with the sales team to identify potential clients and customize presentations for different market segments. Everything had seemed to be progressing perfectly, and I had started to believe that my career was finally taking off in the direction I had always dreamed. The warning signs had been subtle enough that I had missed them completely. Marcus had started having more closed-door meetings with Dylan and other executives. Natalie had begun asking increasingly detailed questions about the core algorithm structure, claiming she needed to understand every component for integration purposes. There had been several requests for me to document every aspect of the algorithm development process, supposedly for patent applications and technical manuals. I had complied with everything because I trusted them completely and wanted to ensure that predictive flow launched successfully. The night before that devastating email, Marcus and I had been working late on final preparations for a presentation to Henderson Industries scheduled for the following week. "You should be proud of what you've accomplished," he had told me as we reviewed the technical demonstrations. "This algorithm is going to establish NeuroTech as the leader in predictive analytics." He had seemed slightly distant, but I had attributed that to the pressure of the upcoming presentation. When he had kissed me goodnight, it had felt normal, affectionate, exactly like the relationship we had been building for months. Walking into that executive conference room the next morning, I had expected to discuss final details for the Henderson presentation or perhaps address some last-minute technical concerns. Instead, I found Marcus, Dylan, Natalie, and two people I didn't recognize sitting around the polished table with expressions that immediately told me something was seriously wrong. "Zara, please sit down," Dylan had said, gesturing to a chair positioned directly across from the group. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The setup had felt like a trial, and I was apparently the defendant. "We've made some difficult decisions about the direction of predictive and your role with the company," Marcus had begun, refusing to make eye contact with me. His voice had been cold, professional, completely different from the warmth I was accustomed to hearing. "After extensive review, we've determined that the algorithm requires significant modifications before it can be successfully commercialized." The words had hit me like a physical blow because I knew they weren't true. Predictive had been performing flawlessly in all testing scenarios. Dylan had taken over the conversation at that point. "We've decided to restructure the development team with Natalie as the lead developer moving forward. Her experience with large-scale implementations makes her better suited to handle the commercial phase of the project." Natalie had been sitting there nodding along, as if this betrayal had been planned for weeks. The worst part had been that she hadn't even looked embarrassed or apologetic. She had seemed satisfied, like she was finally getting something she deserved. "What exactly are you telling me?" I had asked, though I was beginning to understand the horrifying reality of what was happening. "Are you removing me from my own project?" The question had sounded naive even as I asked it, but I had still been hoping that there was some misunderstanding that could be resolved. "We're terminating your employment with NeuroTech effective immediately," Dylan had announced with the casual tone of someone discussing lunch plans. "The algorithm will continue development under Natalie's direction with support from our expanded technical team." One of the strangers had pushed a folder across the table toward me. "These are the termination documents and your final paycheck. We've also included a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and a non-compete clause that prevents you from working on similar projects for other companies." The betrayal had been so complete, so perfectly orchestrated, that I had initially been too shocked to respond. Marcus, the man I had trusted with my career and my heart, had been staring at his hands throughout the entire conversation. When I had finally found my voice, the first words out of my mouth had been directed at him. "You knew about this. You've been planning this." It hadn't been a question because his body language had already confirmed what I suspected. "Zara, this is business," he had replied, finally looking at me with eyes that seemed like they belonged to a complete stranger. "Predictive has commercial potential, but it needs experienced leadership to reach that potential. You're brilliant, but you don't have the industry experience necessary to manage a project of this magnitude." The casual dismissal of everything I had created had been devastating, but the personal betrayal had cut even deeper. "Industry experience?" I had repeated, feeling anger beginning to replace shock. "I created this algorithm from scratch. Every line of code, every mathematical model, every innovative feature came from my work. You're stealing my intellectual property and justifying it by claiming I'm not qualified to manage my own creation." The room had been completely silent except for the sound of air conditioning and my own increasingly rapid breathing. Natalie had finally spoken up, and her words had completed the destruction of everything I thought I understood about my place at NeuroTech. "The algorithm concept was developed collaboratively. While you contributed significantly to the initial framework, the current version incorporates substantial modifications and improvements from multiple team members. The intellectual property belongs to NeuroTech, not to any individual developer." She had delivered this lie with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed it multiple times. The legal documents had made it clear that I had no recourse. According to my employment contract, anything I developed while working for NeuroTech belonged to the company. The non-compete agreement prevented me from working on similar projects for any competitor for a period of 2 years. The non-disclosure agreement prohibited me from discussing any proprietary information, including details about my own algorithm. They had constructed a legal cage that would prevent me from using my expertise or knowledge for years. Walking out of that building with my personal belongings in a cardboard box had been the most humiliating experience of my professional life. 3 years of work, innovation, and dedication had been reduced to accusations that I wasn't qualified to manage. My own creation. The algorithm that was projected to generate $500 million in revenue would launch under Natalie's name, with Marcus taking credit for the technical leadership that had made it possible. Dylan would claim executive vision for recognizing the commercial potential. My contribution would be erased from the official history as if I had never existed. The personal betrayal had been even more devastating than the professional theft. Marcus had used our relationship to monitor my work, gain access to my development process, and ultimately position himself to steal everything I had created. Every intimate conversation, every moment of vulnerability, every expression of trust had been weaponized against me. I had been so naive, so completely fooled by his manipulation, that I questioned my ability to judge anyone's character or intentions. That night, sitting in my apartment surrounded by the remnants of a career that had been stolen from me, I had made a decision that would change everything. They had taken my job, my algorithm, and my trust, but they had made one critical mistake. In their rush to remove me from the equation, they had overlooked one crucial detail that would eventually become their downfall. They had forgotten that I still had complete access to the source code, and more importantly, I understood predictive flow better than anyone else ever could. What they had stolen was just the beginning of what I was capable of creating. The first week after my termination passed in a haze of disbelief and rage. I spent most of my time on the couch, alternating between staring at my laptop screen and replaying every moment of the betrayal. My savings account had enough to cover maybe 3 months of expenses if I was careful, but the non-compete clause made finding another position in my field nearly impossible. Every tech company in Austin knew about NeuroTech's success, and word traveled fast in the industry. When potential employers discovered I had been terminated from the company behind the revolutionary predictive flow algorithm, their interest evaporated quickly. The worst part was watching the tech news coverage as NeuroTech began their marketing campaign. Marcus appeared in several interviews, positioning himself as the brilliant mind behind the breakthrough in predictive analytics. "Our team has developed something truly revolutionary," he told TechCrunch during a feature interview. "This represents years of collaborative innovation and represents the future of financial technology." Seeing him take credit for my work while sitting in the same office where we had spent countless nights debugging code felt like watching someone steal my identity. Natalie had been equally shameless in claiming ownership of the algorithm's development. In a Forbes article about women in tech leadership, she described predictive flow as the culmination of my experience in machine learning and artificial intelligence. The breakthrough came from recognizing that traditional prediction models were fundamentally limited by their inability to adapt to changing market conditions. She had even included technical details that came directly from my development notes, presenting them as her own insights and innovations. Dylan had been the most infuriating of all, because he positioned himself as the visionary executive who had recognized the commercial potential that lesser minds had missed. The challenge wasn't developing the technology, he explained during a CNBC interview. The challenge was understanding how to transform brilliant academic concepts into practical business solutions. That's where leadership and industry experience become crucial. His implication was clear that I had been an academic theorist who lacked the practical understanding necessary for real-world implementation. The Henderson Industries announcement came 6 weeks after my termination. NeuroTech had successfully secured the $500 million contract, with PredictiveFlow as the centerpiece of their predictive analytics suite. The press release credited Marcus as Chief Technology Officer, Natalie as Lead Algorithm Developer, and Dylan as the CEO whose strategic vision had made the partnership possible. My name appeared nowhere in any of the coverage, as if 3 years of my life had been completely erased from the historical record. Watching my own creation generate massive success for the people who had stolen it triggered something inside me that went beyond anger or disappointment. It was a cold, calculating fury that demanded action rather than self-pity. They had taken my algorithm, but they had also underestimated both my capabilities and my determination. The non-compete clause prevented me from working for competitors, but it said nothing about starting my own company. More importantly, while they had legal ownership of PredictiveFlow, they didn't truly understand how it worked or how it could be improved. That realization became the foundation for my plan. PredictiveFlow was revolutionary, but it was also just the beginning of what was possible with adaptive prediction technology. The algorithm they had stolen was version 1 of something that could evolve far beyond what they imagined. They had the source code, but I had the knowledge, creativity, and motivation to build something exponentially better. Their betrayal had inadvertently freed me from the constraints of corporate hierarchy and given me the motivation to pursue possibilities I had never considered while working within their system. The decision to leave Austin came after a particularly brutal encounter at a coffee shop near the NeuroTech office. I had been meeting with a potential freelance client when Marcus walked in with several colleagues. The conversation at their table was loud enough for me to overhear, and they were discussing upcoming enhancements to PredictiveFlow. The core algorithm is solid, Marcus was saying, but we need to expand its capabilities for international markets. The Asian financial systems operate differently, and we'll need to modify the prediction models accordingly. Listening to him discuss modifications to my work as if he understood the underlying architecture was infuriating, but it also confirmed that they were already struggling with improvements beyond the original design. When Marcus noticed me sitting across the room, his expression shifted from confident to uncomfortable. He excused himself from his colleagues and approached my table with the kind of forced casualness that people use when they're trying to appear unaffected by an awkward situation. "Zara, how are you doing? I heard you've been exploring some freelance opportunities." His tone was patronizing, as if he was checking on a former employee who had been let go for performance issues rather than someone whose work he had stolen. "I'm doing exactly what you'd expect," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Building something new, something better." The words came out more confidently than I actually felt at that moment, but I could see uncertainty flicker across his face. He had expected to find me broken and defeated, not planning a comeback. "That's great to hear," he said, though his voice suggested otherwise. "I hope you're being careful about the non-compete restrictions." The legal team was very thorough with those documents. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. He was reminding me that they had constructed legal barriers to prevent me from competing with their stolen success. "I'm being very careful about everything," I assured him with a smile that contained no warmth. "You should be too." The comment had been deliberately ambiguous, but I could see it had rattled him. He returned to his table, but I noticed him glancing in my direction several times before they left. That encounter had crystallized my determination to leave Austin and start over somewhere they couldn't monitor my activities or intimidate me with their legal threats. Denver had appealed to me for several reasons. The tech scene was growing rapidly, but wasn't as established as Silicon Valley or Austin, which meant there were opportunities for innovation without the entrenched corporate politics. The cost of living was reasonable compared to major tech hubs, which would allow my savings to last longer while I developed my new company. Most importantly, it was far enough from Austin that I could work without constantly looking over my shoulder for NeuroTech representatives or their legal team. The drive from Austin to Denver had been both liberating and terrifying. My entire life fit into my Honda Civic with room to spare. Everything I owned that mattered could be transported in a single trip, which was either depressing evidence of how little I had accumulated or encouraging proof of how little I needed to start. Over. By the time I reached the Colorado state line, I had convinced myself it was the latter. Finding an apartment in Denver had been an adventure in creative financing and lowered expectations. The places I could afford were either in questionable neighborhoods or had enough structural issues to make long-term residence inadvisable. I eventually settled on a studio apartment in the Capitol Hill area that was small but clean, with decent internet connectivity, and a landlord who didn't require extensive employment verification. The rent consumed nearly half of my remaining savings each month, but it provided a base of operations while I figured out my next moves. The loneliness had been the most unexpected challenge during those first weeks in Denver. In Austin, even during the worst periods of overwork and stress, I had been surrounded by colleagues and the constant activity of a busy office environment. In Denver, I knew absolutely no one, and my daily interactions were limited to coffee, shop baristas, and grocery store cashiers. The isolation had given me plenty of time to think, but it had also amplified every doubt and insecurity about my decision to start over in an unfamiliar city. My first priority had been developing a business plan that would allow me to work around the non-compete restrictions while building towards something that could eventually compete with NeuroTech. The legal language prevented me from working on similar projects for competitors, but it was vague enough that I could potentially work on adjacent technologies that didn't directly replicate PredictiveFlow's specific functionality. I spent weeks researching patent databases and industry publications to identify areas where I could innovate without triggering legal challenges. The breakthrough in my strategic thinking came from analyzing what NeuroTech was doing wrong with PredictiveFlow. Their marketing materials and press interviews revealed that they were positioning it primarily as a financial prediction tool for large investment firms. That was lucrative but limited in scope. My original vision had been much broader. The adaptive learning principles that made PredictiveFlow successful for financial markets could be applied to any industry that required predictive analytics. Healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, energy, retail, every sector had prediction challenges that could benefit from more sophisticated algorithms. I began developing what I called Quantum Predict, an adaptive analytics platform that could be customized for different industries and use cases. The core principles would be similar to PredictiveFlow, but implemented with more advanced machine learning techniques and designed for broader applications. Instead of competing directly with NeuroTech in their chosen market, I would build a superior technology that could eventually expand into their territory from a position of strength. The development work had to be conducted carefully to avoid any appearance of using proprietary information from NeuroTech. I documented every line of code, every algorithm design decision, and every innovative feature to demonstrate that Quantum Predict was an original creation rather than a modification of PredictiveFlow. The process was slower than it would have been if I could build directly on my previous work, but it also forced me to think more creatively about solutions and improvements. Working alone in my studio apartment had been both challenging and surprisingly productive. Without the distractions of office politics and corporate meetings, I could focus entirely on development work. I established a routine of coding from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, with breaks for meals and brief walks around the neighborhood. Evenings were dedicated to research, business planning, and learning about industries where Quantum Predict could eventually be applied. The financial pressure had been constant during those months of development. My savings were disappearing steadily, and I had no income to replace what I was spending on rent, food, and basic living expenses. I took on occasional freelance programming, projects that didn't violate my non-compete restrictions, but the pay was minimal, and the work was mind-numbing compared to the innovation I was pursuing with Quantum Predict. There were weeks when I had to choose between buying groceries and paying for internet service, and the internet always won because it was essential for my work. The first functional prototype of Quantum Predict had taken 4 months to develop. It was crude compared to what I eventually envisioned, but it could successfully analyze sample data sets and produce predictive models that adapted based on changing input conditions. More importantly, it demonstrated capabilities that went beyond what predictive flow could accomplish. While predictive flow was designed specifically for financial market prediction, Quantum Predict could learn the patterns and relationships within any dataset and develop predictive models tailored to that specific domain. Testing the prototype had required datasets from various industries, which presented another challenge. Most companies were reluctant to share proprietary data with a solo developer working out of a studio apartment, regardless of how impressive the technology appeared to be. I spent weeks reaching out to small businesses, academic researchers, and nonprofit organizations that might be willing to experiment with innovative analytics in exchange for free implementation and results. My first real client had been a small renewable energy company called Solar Flow Dynamics that was struggling to predict maintenance needs for their distributed solar panel installations. Their existing approach relied on scheduled maintenance, regardless of actual system performance, which was expensive and inefficient. The owner, a former electrical engineer named Ryan Torres, had been intrigued by my proposal to develop predictive maintenance algorithms that could anticipate problems before they occurred. The initial meeting with Ryan had taken place at a coffee shop in downtown Denver, and I had been nervous about presenting my work to someone who actually understood the technical complexities involved. "Your algorithm concept is fascinating," he had said after reviewing my presentation materials. "But I'm curious about your background. Most people developing this level of technology are working for major corporations or well-funded startups. What brings a solo developer to predictive analytics?" I had prepared for that question, but actually answering it required more honesty than I was comfortable sharing with a potential client. I spent several years developing similar technology for a larger company, but I wanted to explore applications beyond their core market focus. Sometimes the best innovation happens when you're free from corporate constraints and can pursue possibilities that might seem too risky for established organizations. It was technically true while avoiding the details about theft and betrayal that had actually motivated my independence. Ryan had nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate entrepreneurial risk-taking, but I need to be confident that you can deliver what you're promising. Our maintenance costs are killing our profit margins, and we can't afford to invest time and money in something that doesn't produce measurable results." His skepticism was reasonable, and I knew that solar flow dynamics represented my opportunity to prove that Quantum Predict could succeed in real-world applications. The contract we negotiated was modest but fair. Ryan would provide access to their maintenance records and system performance data, and I would develop a predictive analytics solution tailored to their specific needs. If the algorithm successfully reduced their maintenance costs by at least 20% over a 6-month testing period, they would pay my full fee and provide references for future clients. If it failed to meet that threshold, I would receive only enough compensation to cover my basic expenses during the development period. Working with real data from Solar Flow Dynamics had been both exciting and terrifying. Unlike the controlled testing environments I had used for prototype development, their systems generated messy, inconsistent data with gaps, errors, and anomalies that could confuse or break predictive algorithms. Quantum Predict needed to be robust enough to handle real-world data quality issues, while still producing accurate predictions about maintenance needs. The development process had required me to learn far more about solar panel technology than I had ever expected. Understanding how photovoltaic systems degraded over time, how weather conditions affected performance, and how different types of failures manifested in system data was essential for creating algorithms that could distinguish between normal variations and genuine problems requiring maintenance intervention. Ryan had been patient with my questions and generous with his expertise, treating our collaboration as a genuine partnership rather than a vendor relationship. 3 months into the Solar Flow project, Quantum Predict had successfully identified 12 potential system failures before they caused significant downtime or damage. The algorithm had also recommended delaying scheduled maintenance on 37 systems that were performing within normal parameters, saving thousands of dollars in unnecessary service calls. Ryan had been impressed enough to extend our contract and introduce me to other renewable energy companies that might benefit from similar analytics. More importantly, the SolarFlow success had given me confidence that Quantum Predict could be successfully applied to industries beyond financial markets. The adaptive learning principles that I had originally developed for predicting market behavior were equally effective for predicting equipment failures, customer behavior, supply chain disruptions, or any other pattern that could be extracted from data. I was building something with broader applications and greater potential than PredictiveFlow, despite having started with fewer resources and no corporate support. The referrals from Ryan had led to contracts with 2 other companies, a small manufacturing firm that needed to predict equipment maintenance schedules, and a logistics company that wanted to optimize delivery routes based on traffic patterns and customer behavior. Each project had required customizing Quantum Predict for different data types and prediction requirements, but the core algorithm had proven flexible enough to handle diverse applications while maintaining accuracy and reliability. By the end of my first year in Denver, I had established a small but growing client base and had refined Quantum Predict into a robust platform that could be adapted for various industries. My financial situation had stabilized enough that I could afford a slightly larger apartment and didn't have to choose between groceries and internet service. More importantly, I had proven to myself that I could build something successful without corporate resources or support from people who had betrayed my trust. The expansion from solo developer to actual company had happened gradually, as demand for Quantum Predict exceeded what I could handle alone. I hired Kai Patel, a recent computer science graduate from University of Colorado, as my first employee. He was brilliant with data visualization and user interface design, skills that complemented my algorithm development expertise. Together, we transformed Quantum Predict from a powerful but difficult-to-use analytical tool into a comprehensive platform that clients could implement and operate without extensive technical support. Kai had been initially skeptical about joining a startup founded by someone with no apparent corporate experience or academic credentials. "I've never heard of you or your previous work," he had admitted during his interview. "That's unusual for someone developing technology this sophisticated. Most people in this field have published research or worked for recognizable companies." His directness had been refreshing after years of corporate politics and hidden agendas. "My previous experience was with a company that didn't encourage individual recognition," I had explained. "But the work speaks for itself. If Quantum Predict performs as promised and helps our clients achieve measurable results, does it matter whether I have impressive credentials or publish papers?" Kai had agreed to a trial period, and his skepticism had gradually transformed into genuine enthusiasm as he understood the potential of what we were building together. The official incorporation of quantum analytics had been a milestone that felt both significant and anticlimactic. After months of operating as a sole proprietorship, having actual business documents and legal recognition felt like validation that I was building something real rather than just pursuing an elaborate form of revenge against my former colleagues. At the same time, the paperwork and legal requirements were mundane compared to the technical breakthroughs and client successes that had led to that point. Ryan Torres had become more than just a client during our collaboration on predictive maintenance algorithms. Our working relationship had evolved into a friendship based on mutual respect and shared enthusiasm for innovative technology. He understood the challenges of building a business around unproven concepts, and I appreciated his willingness to take risks on solutions that might not work as promised. When he asked me to dinner to celebrate Quantum Predict's successful implementation at SolarFlow Dynamics, I had initially assumed it was a business meeting to discuss future projects. "This isn't about work," Ryan had clarified when I started discussing potential enhancements to the maintenance prediction algorithms. I wanted to celebrate your success and get to know you as a person rather than just a brilliant developer. His interest had been unexpected, but welcome. After Marcus's betrayal, I had convinced myself that mixing personal and professional relationships was too risky, but Ryan represented a completely different approach to business and relationships based on honesty and mutual support rather than manipulation and exploitation. Our romantic relationship had developed slowly and carefully, both of us aware of the potential complications of dating someone who was also a business client. Ryan had been understanding about my reluctance to discuss my previous work experience, and I had gradually shared more details about the betrayal that had driven me to Denver. His reaction had been supportive rather than judgmental, focusing on my resilience and achievements rather than dwelling on the injustices I had experienced. What they did was unethical and probably illegal, he had said after I finally told him the complete story about NeuroTech. But their theft also inadvertently freed you to build something better than what they stole. Quantum Predict is more innovative and versatile than anything I've seen from larger companies. You turned their betrayal into your competitive advantage. His perspective had helped me reframe my experience as a foundation for success, rather than just a source of anger and resentment. The growth of quantum analytics had accelerated as word spread about Quantum Predict's success across different industries. We were handling more projects than Kai and I could manage alone, which necessitated hiring additional developers and expanding our office space beyond my apartment. The transition from startup to actual company had been exciting, but also stressful, as I learned to manage employees, client relationships, and business operations while continuing to innovate and improve our core technology. The second round of hiring had brought in 3 additional team members, each with specialized expertise that enhanced our capabilities. Sarah Kim had experience with healthcare data analytics and helped us develop Quantum Predict applications for medical diagnosis and treatment optimization. Michael Chen specialized in supply chain logistics and manufacturing processes, opening opportunities in industries that relied heavily on predictive analytics for operational efficiency. Elena Rodriguez had worked for several financial services companies and understood the regulatory requirements and industry standards necessary for eventual expansion into NeuroTech's primary market. 2 years after fleeing Austin in disgrace, I was running a successful company with 12 employees, offices in downtown Denver, and a client roster that included firms across 6 different industries. Quantum Predict had evolved into a comprehensive platform that could be rapidly customized for new applications while maintaining the adaptive learning capabilities that distinguished it from traditional analytics software. Our revenue was approaching $2 million annually, and we were beginning to attract attention from investors interested in funding expansion into larger markets. The irony of my situation wasn't lost on me. While hiding in Denver and building Quantum Predict to avoid competing directly with NeuroTech, I had inadvertently created something with far greater potential than the algorithm they had stolen from me. Their theft had forced me to think beyond the limitations of financial market prediction and develop technology that could revolutionize predictive analytics across multiple industries. What they had taken was just the beginning of what I was capable of creating. The news about NeuroTech's struggles had begun filtering back to me through industry publications and former colleagues who had tracked down my contact information. Despite their initial success with the Henderson Industries contract, they were having difficulty expanding PredictiveFlow beyond financial market applications. The algorithm was performing as designed, but it lacked the flexibility needed for different data types and prediction requirements. Their attempts to modify it for other industries had resulted in reduced accuracy and reliability issues that were frustrating clients and limiting growth opportunities. More significantly, several of their major clients were expressing dissatisfaction with PredictiveFlow's inability to adapt to changing market conditions that differed significantly from its training data. The algorithm was revolutionary for the specific scenarios it had been designed to handle, but it couldn't evolve beyond those parameters without extensive reprogramming that Marcus and Natalie apparently couldn't accomplish. They had stolen my work but not my understanding of how to improve and expand it. The validation of my original vision was satisfying, but it also presented an opportunity that I hadn't previously considered. Quantum Predict was demonstrably superior to predictive flow in terms of flexibility, adaptability, and range of applications. If I could successfully expand into financial market prediction, I could compete directly with NeuroTech using technology that surpassed what they had stolen from me. The non-compete clause that had initially seemed like such a devastating restriction would expire in just 6 months, opening the possibility of direct competition in their core market. The decision to prepare for eventual competition with NeuroTech had required careful strategic planning and significant investment in development resources. Financial market prediction involved regulatory requirements, security standards, and integration challenges that were different from other industries where Quantum Predict had proven successful. We needed to ensure that our platform could meet the stringent requirements of major investment firms while maintaining the adaptive capabilities that distinguished it from traditional prediction software. Elena Rodriguez had been instrumental in developing our financial services strategy. Her previous experience with regulatory compliance and industry standards provided guidance that would have taken me years to acquire independently. The financial services market is incredibly lucrative, she had explained during one of our strategy sessions, but it's also conservative and risk-averse. Firms won't adopt new technology unless it demonstrably outperforms existing solutions and meets all regulatory requirements. We need to be absolutely certain that Quantum Predict can deliver superior results before we approach major clients. The development of Quantum Predict's financial market capabilities had taken 8 months of intensive work. We had to ensure that the algorithm could handle the volume, velocity, and complexity of real-time market data while maintaining the accuracy and adaptability that distinguished it from competitors. The testing phase had required partnerships with smaller investment firms that were willing to experiment with innovative technology in exchange for reduced fees and early access to improvements. The results had exceeded even my optimistic expectations. Quantum Predict consistently outperformed traditional prediction software by significant margins, achieving accuracy rates above 90%, even during periods of high market volatility. More importantly, the algorithm demonstrated the adaptive learning capabilities that predictive flow lacked, automatically adjusting its prediction models when market conditions changed in ways that hadn't been anticipated during its training phase. The success of our financial market testing had attracted attention from investors who understood the commercial potential of superior predictive analytics. We received several acquisition offers and partnership proposals that would have provided immediate access to larger markets and substantial financial resources. However, I had learned from my experience with NeuroTech that maintaining control over my innovations was more important than short-term financial gains. Instead of selling or partnering, we accepted investment funding that allowed us to expand our team and capabilities while retaining ownership and decision-making authority. The formal launch of Quantum Predict's financial services division had been scheduled to coincide with the expiration of my non-compete clause. After 2 years of building technology and capabilities in adjacent markets, we were finally ready to compete directly with NeuroTech in their core business area. The timing felt symbolic, marking not just the end of legal restrictions, but also my transition from someone seeking to avoid her past to someone ready to confront it with superior technology and greater determination. The week before our official launch, I received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. Brennan was on the line, and his voice carried a combination of desperation and barely concealed panic that I had never heard before. "Zara, we need to talk. There are some developments with predictive flow that require your expertise. I think we may have made some mistakes that only you can help us fix." The irony of his request for help was so complete that I almost laughed. The man who had stolen my work and claimed I lacked the experience to manage it was now admitting that he couldn't solve problems that had emerged from his own modifications. "I'm not sure how I can help you," I replied, keeping my voice carefully neutral. I've been focused on other projects since leaving NeuroTech, and I'm sure your team has made significant improvements to the algorithm since my departure. The polite fiction that his team had been responsible for any improvements was deliberate. I wanted to hear exactly how desperate they had become before revealing the extent of my knowledge about their struggles. The improvements haven't been as straightforward as we anticipated, Marcus admitted reluctantly. Some of the modifications we attempted have created unexpected issues, and we're having difficulty resolving them without affecting the algorithm's core functionality. Your original development documentation has been helpful, but there are some aspects of the design that aren't fully explained in the existing records. His admission that they were relying on my documentation to understand the algorithm they had claimed as their own innovation was particularly satisfying. That's unfortunate, I said sympathetically, but I'm not sure how I can assist given the non-compete restrictions and confidentiality agreements from my termination. I wouldn't want to create legal complications for either of us. The reminder of the legal barriers they had constructed to prevent me from competing was intentional. I wanted him to understand that any help would require them to acknowledge their limitations and request assistance from someone they had dismissed as unqualified. Marcus's response revealed just how desperate their situation had become. We could potentially arrange a consulting agreement that would work around those restrictions. Dylan is concerned about the Henderson contract renewal, and some of our other major clients have expressed frustrations with recent performance issues. We need someone who understands the original algorithm architecture to help us resolve these problems before they affect our business relationships. The fact that they were willing to pay me to fix problems with my own stolen work was almost too ironic to believe. I appreciate the offer, I replied, but I'm actually quite busy with my current projects. Quantum analytics has been growing rapidly, and we're preparing to launch some exciting new capabilities that require my full attention. Perhaps you could describe the specific issues you're experiencing, and I could recommend some other consultants who might be able to help. My suggestion that other consultants could solve their problems was deliberately disingenuous. The issues they were experiencing resulted from fundamental misunderstandings about how predictive flow operated, and no external consultant could fix. Problems that required intimate knowledge of the original design principles. The silence on Marcus's end of the call lasted long enough that I wondered if the connection had been lost. When he finally responded, his voice carried a note of resignation that confirmed my suspicions about the severity of their situation. We've already consulted with several external experts, and none of them have been able to identify the source of the performance degradation. The algorithm appears to be functioning correctly according to all standard metrics, but it's producing prediction errors in scenarios that should be well within its capabilities. We're concerned that there may be some aspect of the original design that we're not fully understanding or implementing correctly. His admission that they didn't understand the algorithm they had stolen was exactly what I had hoped to hear, but it also presented an opportunity that I hadn't anticipated. Instead of simply refusing to help, I could use their desperation to create a situation that would expose their theft and demonstrate the superiority of my new technology. I might be willing to take a look at the issues you're describing, I said carefully, but any consulting arrangement would need to include access to the current algorithm implementation and performance data. I would also need to understand what modifications have been made since the original development to assess how they might be affecting functionality. Marcus agreed to the terms with an eagerness that confirmed how serious their problems had become. Within 2 days, I had signed a consulting agreement that provided access to everything I needed to understand what they had done to my algorithm and why it was failing. More importantly, the agreement included provisions that would allow me to present alternative solutions if their existing approach proved to be fundamentally flawed. Reviewing the current state of predictive flow had been both infuriating and enlightening. They had made dozens of modifications to the original algorithm, most of which demonstrated a complete misunderstanding of how the adaptive learning system was supposed to function. In their attempts to expand its capabilities and improve its performance, They had inadvertently broken the core mechanisms that allowed it to learn from new data and adjust its predictions accordingly. The algorithm was still producing results, but it was essentially running on autopilot using patterns it had learned during the original training phase. The problems they were experiencing would only get worse as market conditions continued to evolve beyond the scenarios that PredictiveFlow had been trained to handle. Eventually, the algorithm would become completely unreliable as its static models became increasingly disconnected from actual market behavior. They had turned a revolutionary adaptive system into a sophisticated but ultimately limited traditional prediction tool, which explained why they were losing clients and struggling to expand into new markets. My analysis confirmed that fixing their modified version of PredictiveFlow would require essentially rebuilding it from scratch using the original design principles. However, instead of recommending that approach, I suggested a different solution that would ultimately serve my larger strategic objectives. The modifications you've made have created fundamental architectural problems that would be expensive and time-consuming to resolve, I explained during my presentation to Marcus, Dylan, and Natalie. However, I've been developing some enhanced predictive analytics technology that could potentially address your current challenges while providing superior performance and greater flexibility. The proposal to replace PredictiveFlow with Quantum Predict had been presented as a potential solution to their immediate problems rather than a competitive threat to their business model. I positioned it as an upgraded version of predictive analytics that incorporated lessons learned from PredictiveFlow's limitations and included capabilities that their clients were increasingly demanding. The demonstration of Quantum Predict's performance using their own datasets had been devastating in its superiority, achieving accuracy rates that their modified PredictiveFlow couldn't approach while handling market scenarios that caused their algorithm to fail completely. Dylan's reaction to the demonstration had been a mixture of amazement and suspicion. This technology is significantly more advanced than anything we've seen from other companies, he had observed. How did you develop something this sophisticated working independently? His question contained an implicit accusation that I had somehow used proprietary information from NeuroTech, but it also revealed his recognition that Quantum Predict represented a genuine breakthrough rather than an incremental improvement. The principles behind adaptive predictive analytics have been evolving rapidly, I had replied diplomatically. Quantum Predict incorporates several years of research and development focused specifically on the limitations that traditional prediction systems encounter in dynamic environments. The financial services applications are just one area where these enhanced capabilities provide significant advantages. My explanation was technically accurate, while avoiding any mention of the connection between Quantum Predict and my original work on PredictiveFlow. Natalie had been noticeably quiet during the entire presentation, and her discomfort was obvious to everyone in the room. She understood enough about algorithm development to recognize that Quantum Predict represented a fundamental advancement beyond anything she could have created independently. More importantly, she probably suspected that the technology had originated from someone with intimate knowledge of PredictiveFlow's design and limitations, though she couldn't prove it without admitting that she had never fully understood the algorithm she had claimed to develop. The licensing proposal I presented offered NeuroTech access to Quantum Predict technology that would resolve their immediate performance issues while positioning them to compete more effectively in the evolving predictive analytics market. The financial terms were generous enough to seem reasonable, while being structured in ways that would ultimately benefit quantum analytics more than NeuroTech. Most importantly, the agreement would establish my company as the technology leader while reducing NeuroTech to essentially a reseller of my innovations. Marcus had been the most conflicted about the proposal because he understood both its necessity and its implications. Accepting my offer would solve their technical problems and potentially save their major client relationships, but it would also acknowledge that they couldn't successfully develop or maintain the technology that had built their reputation. Rejecting the offer would leave them with a deteriorating algorithm and increasingly dissatisfied clients, potentially leading to the collapse of everything they had built on my stolen work. We need some time to evaluate this proposal and discuss it with our legal and technical teams, Dylan had announced after the presentation concluded. The technology is impressive, but this would represent a significant change in our business model and partnership structure. We'll need to carefully consider all the implications before making a decision. His diplomatic language couldn't disguise the fact that they were trapped between acknowledging their limitations and risking the loss of everything they had built on technology they didn't understand. The 3 weeks that followed my presentation were filled with anxious waiting and careful preparation for whatever decision NeuroTech would make. If they accepted my proposal, I would achieve a level of vindication that went beyond simple revenge. I would have demonstrated that my technology was superior to what they had stolen and forced them to acknowledge their dependence on my innovations. If they rejected the proposal, I would launch Quantum Predict's financial services division as planned and compete directly with their deteriorating algorithm using demonstrably superior technology. Either outcome would represent a victory, but I found myself hoping they would accept the licensing agreement. Direct competition would be satisfying, but having them acknowledge their need for my help would be a more complete vindication of everything I had endured since leaving Austin. They had dismissed me as unqualified to manage my own creation, and now they were facing the choice between accepting my help or watching their stolen empire crumble around them. The call from Dylan came on a Friday afternoon, and his voice carried the resignation of someone who had run out of alternatives. We've decided to move forward with the licensing agreement for Quantum Predict technology. Our technical team has confirmed that it represents the best solution for addressing our current challenges while positioning us for future growth. When can we schedule a meeting to finalize the implementation timeline and contractual details? His acceptance of my proposal was professionally worded, but I could hear the defeat underlying his corporate language. The signing ceremony for the licensing agreement had taken place in NeuroTech's executive conference room, the same space where they had terminated my employment and stolen my work 2.5 years earlier. Sitting at that polished table, as the CEO of a successful company, while Marcus, Dylan, and Natalie signed documents acknowledging their dependence on my technology, felt like the most complete vindication I could have imagined. They had taken my algorithm and claimed I lacked the expertise to manage it, but now they were paying me millions of dollars for access to the superior technology I had developed independently. The implementation of Quantum Predict at NeuroTech proceeded smoothly, with their clients immediately noticing significant improvements in prediction accuracy and system reliability. The Henderson Industries contract renewal that they had been worried about was secured easily once Quantum Predict demonstrated performance levels that exceeded their original commitments. Several other major clients who had been considering switching to competitors decided to expand their contracts instead, generating revenue growth that exceeded their most optimistic projections. Marcus had been forced to work directly with my technical team during the Quantum Predict implementation, creating an awkward dynamic where my former mentor was essentially learning from my employees how to operate technology that surpassed his understanding. Watching him struggle to comprehend concepts that Kai explained with casual expertise was particularly satisfying. The man who had once patronized me about industry experience was now taking notes during training sessions led by a recent college graduate who understood my algorithms better than Marcus ever had. The transformation of my relationship with Ryan had accelerated during the months of preparing for direct competition with NeuroTech. What had begun as a business partnership and evolved into friendship had deepened into something more significant. As we spent countless evenings discussing strategy, reviewing technical specifications, and planning for quantum analytics expansion, his understanding of both business operations and my personal motivations made him an invaluable advisor, but it was his unwavering confidence in my abilities that helped me believe I could successfully challenge the company that had stolen my work. Our romantic relationship had developed naturally from the foundation of mutual respect and shared values that characterized our business interactions. Unlike my experience with Marcus, where professional admiration had been tainted by manipulation and hidden agendas, my connection with Ryan was built on transparency and genuine partnership. He had never tried to diminish my achievements or position himself as my superior. Instead, he consistently encouraged me to pursue opportunities that showcased my capabilities and expanded my influence in the tech industry. The decision to move in together had been practical as much as romantic. Both of our companies were growing rapidly, requiring longer hours and more travel than we had initially anticipated. Coordinating our schedules had become increasingly difficult, and maintaining separate households seemed inefficient when we were spending most of our free time together anyway. Ryan's house in the Highlands neighborhood was larger than my apartment and had enough space for both of us to work from home when necessary, without interfering with each other's projects. Living with Ryan had revealed aspects of his character that made me appreciate him even more. He was genuinely supportive of my success without any apparent jealousy or insecurity about my growing prominence in the tech industry. When quantum analytics was featured on the cover of Colorado Business Magazine as one of the state's fastest-growing technology companies, Ryan had been more excited about the recognition than I was. His pride in my achievements was authentic and generous, completely different from the competitive undertones that had characterized my relationship with Marcus. The media attention that accompanied quantum analytics' rapid growth had been both beneficial and challenging. The positive coverage helped attract new clients and investors, but it also increased scrutiny of my background and previous experience. Several journalists had noticed that my professional history seemed to begin with my arrival in Denver, and they had started asking questions about my previous work experience that I wasn't ready to answer completely honestly. The truth about my termination from NeuroTech and the theft of my intellectual property was too complex and potentially litigious to discuss in media interviews. My strategy for handling inquiries about my background had been to emphasize my current achievements while being vague about specific details of my previous experience. I spent several years working on predictive analytics projects for a larger technology company, became my standard response to questions about my qualifications. That experience provided valuable insights about both the potential and limitations of traditional approaches to algorithm development. Starting quantum analytics allowed me to pursue more innovative solutions without the constraints of corporate bureaucracy. The explanation was technically accurate while avoiding any mention of the circumstances that had actually motivated my independence. The licensing agreement with NeuroTech had generated significant attention within the tech industry, both because of the substantial financial terms and because it represented an unusual reversal of typical competitive dynamics. Most technology licensing deals involved established companies providing access to their innovations to smaller firms. Having a relatively new company like Quantum Analytics license superior technology to an established player like NeuroTech was noteworthy enough to attract coverage from major industry publications. TechCrunch had published a feature article about the licensing deal that positioned it as evidence of a shift in the predictive analytics market. Quantum analytics has developed technology that represents a significant advancement beyond existing solutions, the article explained. Their ability to license this technology to established competitors demonstrates both the superiority of their approach and the maturity of their business strategy. Rather than engaging in a prolonged competitive battle, they've created a win-win scenario that benefits both companies while establishing quantum analytics as the technology leader in this space. The positive coverage had attracted attention from several major technology investors who were interested in funding quantum analytics expansion into additional markets. The licensing revenue from NeuroTech provided immediate financial stability, but investor funding would allow us to accelerate development of new applications and expand our team more rapidly than organic growth would permit. After careful consideration, we accepted a Series A funding round that valued quantum analytics at $50 million while allowing us to retain majority ownership and operational control. The investment funding had enabled us to move into a larger office space in downtown Denver's emerging tech district and expand our team to 35 employees. The new office was everything I had dreamed of during those early months of working alone in my studio apartment. Modern workspaces with natural light, collaborative areas for team meetings, and advanced computing resources that could handle the most demanding algorithm development projects. More importantly, it was a visible symbol of what we had built, together through innovation, determination, and genuine partnership, rather than theft and manipulation. Kai Patel had grown tremendously during quantum analytics expansion, evolving from a recent graduate with potential into a senior developer who could lead complex projects independently. His growth had been particularly satisfying to watch because it demonstrated the kind of mentorship and professional development that I had expected from Marcus, but never received. Instead of hoarding knowledge or positioning himself as indispensable, Kai shared his expertise generously and actively worked to elevate the capabilities of newer team members. His approach to leadership reflected the values that Ryan and I had tried to establish throughout the company. The culture we had built at Quantum Analytics was deliberately different from the competitive, politically charged environment I had experienced at NeuroTech. We emphasized collaboration over individual achievement, transparency over hidden agendas, and genuine recognition of contributions rather than credit theft. Everyone understood that their success was tied to the company's success, and everyone benefited when we achieved significant milestones. The equity sharing program ensured that key employees had financial incentives to remain with the company and contribute to its long-term growth. Sarah Kim had emerged as our expert on healthcare applications of predictive analytics, leading projects with hospitals and medical research institutions that were generating both significant revenue and genuine improvements in patient outcomes. Her work on predicting surgical complications had been particularly impactful, helping several hospitals reduce post-operative problems by more than 30% through better patient screening and preparation protocols. The healthcare applications of Quantum Predict were proving to be even more lucrative than financial services, with regulatory approval processes that created barriers to competition while protecting our market position. Michael Chen had successfully expanded our manufacturing and logistics capabilities, developing predictive maintenance systems that were saving industrial clients millions of dollars annually in avoided downtime and repair costs. His background in supply chain optimization had been invaluable for understanding how predictive analytics could be integrated into existing operational workflows without disrupting established processes. The manufacturing sector had been particularly receptive to our technology because the cost savings were immediate and measurable, making it easier to justify implementation investments to conservative corporate decision-makers. Elena Rodriguez had become our strategic advisor for financial services expansion, helping us navigate the complex regulatory requirements and industry standards necessary for competing with established firms like NeuroTech. Her previous experience with compliance frameworks had been essential for ensuring that Quantum Predict met all necessary security and reporting requirements while maintaining the performance advantages that distinguished it from traditional solutions. The financial services division was generating the highest profit margins of any segment of our business, validating our decision to eventually compete directly in NeuroTech's core market. The success of our various industry applications had created opportunities that I hadn't anticipated when first developing Quantum Predict. Government agencies had approached us about developing predictive analytics for everything from traffic management to crime prevention. International companies were interested in licensing our technology for markets outside the United States. Academic institutions wanted to collaborate on research projects that could advance the theoretical foundations of adaptive machine learning. Each opportunity represented potential expansion paths that could multiply our impact and revenue far beyond what any single market could provide. The 2-year anniversary of founding Quantum Analytics had been marked by a company celebration that felt like a validation of everything we had accomplished together. Our revenue had grown to $12 million annually, with projections suggesting we would reach $20 million within the next fiscal year. We had established leadership positions in 4 distinct markets and were beginning to expand internationally through partnership agreements with European and Asian technology firms. Most importantly, we had built something that was genuinely innovative and valuable rather than just commercially successful. Ryan had surprised me during the anniversary celebration by announcing his decision to merge solar flow dynamics with quantum analytics, combining our companies into a single organization that could pursue larger opportunities in sustainable technology and predictive analytics. What we've built separately has been successful, he had explained to our combined teams, but what we can build together has the potential to change entire industries. Sustainable technology and predictive analytics are both essential for addressing the challenges that businesses and societies will face in the coming decades. Combining our expertise creates opportunities that neither company could pursue independently. The merger had been structured as a partnership between equals rather than an acquisition, reflecting the mutual respect and shared vision that characterized our relationship. Ryan would lead the sustainable technology division while I focused on algorithm development and predictive analytics applications. Key employees from both companies would have expanded responsibilities and equity positions that recognize their contributions to our combined success. The merged organization would be headquartered in Denver, but would include satellite offices in other cities as we expanded into new markets. The integration of our two companies had proceeded smoothly because both organizations shared similar values and operational approaches. Neither company had developed the kind of toxic corporate culture that prioritized individual advancement over collective achievement. Both teams were accustomed to collaboration and transparency rather than competition and secrecy. The merger felt like a natural evolution of successful partnerships, rather than a forced combination of incompatible organizations. The expanded capabilities that resulted from combining renewable energy expertise with predictive analytics had attracted attention from major corporations that were pursuing sustainability initiatives while optimizing operational efficiency. We had secured contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies to develop integrated systems that could predict energy consumption patterns while optimizing renewable energy utilization. These projects were generating substantial revenue while also contributing to environmental objectives that aligned with our personal values and business philosophy. The success of our sustainability-focused projects had led to speaking opportunities at major industry conferences, where I could share insights about the intersection of predictive analytics and environmental responsibility. The irony of my prominence in the tech industry wasn't lost on me. 2.5 years after being dismissed as unqualified to manage my own innovation, I was being invited to keynote conferences and provide expert commentary for business publications. The recognition felt validating, but it also reminded me of how much my perspective had changed since leaving Austin. During one particularly significant conference presentation, I had been asked about the importance of intellectual property protection in the technology industry. The question provided an opportunity to discuss the challenges that inventors face when their innovations are appropriated by others, though I focused on general principles rather than specific personal experiences. Innovation requires both creativity and courage, I had explained to the audience of entrepreneurs and investors. But it also requires the wisdom to protect your work and the determination to continue creating even when others try to diminish your contributions. The most powerful response to theft or betrayal isn't revenge, but the development of something even better than what was taken. The audience response to my comments about intellectual property had been enthusiastic, with several attendees approaching me afterward to share their own experiences with innovation theft and corporate betrayal. These conversations had reinforced my understanding that my experience with NeuroTech wasn't unique, but that successful recovery from such setbacks was relatively rare. Most people who faced similar circumstances either gave up on innovation entirely or became trapped in lengthy legal battles that consumed their energy and resources without producing satisfactory outcomes. The networking opportunities at industry conferences had led to collaboration proposals from companies and research institutions around the world. A consortium of European universities was interested in joint research projects that could advance the theoretical foundations of adaptive machine learning. Several Asian technology firms wanted to discuss licensing agreements that could bring quantum predict applications to markets we hadn't yet explored. Government agencies were inquiring about predictive analytics applications for public policy and urban planning initiatives that could improve civic services while reducing operational costs. Each new opportunity required careful evaluation to ensure alignment with our strategic objectives and operational capabilities. The temptation to pursue every possibility was strong, especially given the substantial revenue potential, but Ryan and I had agreed that sustainable growth required focus and selectivity. We wanted to build something enduring rather than just maximizing short-term profits, which meant choosing partnerships and projects that strengthened our core capabilities while expanding our impact in meaningful ways. The decision to establish an international presence had been driven by demand from clients who needed predictive analytics solutions for global operations. Many of the companies we worked with had facilities and partnerships around the world, and they needed technology that could function effectively across different regulatory environments and cultural contexts. Establishing offices in London and Singapore would provide local support for international clients while creating opportunities to develop relationships with regional partners and government agencies. The international expansion had required significant investment in legal compliance and cultural adaptation, but it had also provided insights that improved our technology and business practices. Working with clients in different countries had revealed assumptions and limitations in our original algorithm designs that weren't apparent when focusing exclusively on American markets. The process of adapting Quantum Predict for different regulatory frameworks and business practices had actually enhanced its flexibility and performance, making it more valuable for domestic clients as well. The London office had been particularly successful in developing relationships with financial institutions that were exploring innovative approaches to risk assessment and investment strategy. European banks and investment firms were often more willing to experiment with new technology than their American counterparts, partly because regulatory frameworks encouraged innovation while maintaining appropriate risk management standards. The contracts we had secured in London were generating substantial revenue, while also providing opportunities to refine our financial services applications. The Singapore office had focused primarily on manufacturing and logistics applications, working with companies that operated complex supply chains across multiple countries and regulatory environments. The predictive analytics challenges in these contexts were particularly sophisticated because they required understanding cultural factors and regulatory variations that affected operational efficiency. The solutions we had developed for Asian clients were often more robust and adaptable than what was necessary for purely domestic applications. The success of our international operations had attracted attention from global technology firms that were interested in partnership or acquisition opportunities. Several offers had been financially attractive enough to warrant serious consideration, particularly from companies that could provide access to markets and resources that would accelerate our growth. However, the experience with NeuroTech had made me cautious about any arrangement that could compromise our independence or dilute our control over strategic decisions. Ryan had been equally committed to maintaining our autonomy while pursuing opportunities for strategic partnerships that could benefit both organizations without creating dependency relationships. We had developed criteria for evaluating potential partnerships that prioritized mutual benefit, shared values, and complementary capabilities over purely financial considerations. The goal was to build alliances that would strengthen our position in existing markets while creating opportunities to expand into new areas where our technology could have significant impact. The growth of quantum analytics had created opportunities to give back to the entrepreneurial community in ways that reflected my appreciation for the support I had received during the most challenging periods of building the company. We had established an incubator program for early-stage technology companies that provided both financial support and mentorship for entrepreneurs who were developing innovative solutions to complex problems. The program was particularly focused on supporting founders who had been underestimated or dismissed by established organizations, recognizing that some of the most revolutionary innovations come from people who have been excluded from traditional pathways to success. The mentorship component of our incubator program had been personally rewarding because it provided opportunities to share lessons learned from both my failures and successes with entrepreneurs who were facing similar challenges. Many of the founders we worked with had experienced some form of intellectual property theft or corporate betrayal, and they appreciated guidance from someone who had successfully navigated those challenges without becoming bitter or abandoning their innovative ambitions. The relationships I developed through mentoring had enriched my understanding of entrepreneurship while contributing to the success of the next generation of technology leaders. The speaking opportunities that accompanied my growing prominence in the tech industry had provided platforms to advocate for better intellectual property protections and more ethical corporate practices. While I couldn't discuss the specific details of my experience with NeuroTech due to ongoing confidentiality agreements, I could speak generally about the importance of protecting innovators from exploitation and ensuring that credit for achievements goes to the people who actually deserve it. These presentations had generated positive responses from audiences who appreciated hearing from someone who had overcome significant setbacks to build something successful. The media coverage of quantum analytics had evolved from simple business, reporting to more substantial feature articles about the technology we were developing and the impact it was having across multiple industries. Forbes had published a profile that positioned me as one of the most innovative entrepreneurs in predictive analytics, focusing on the breadth of applications we had developed and the superior performance of our technology compared to traditional solutions. The article had been particularly gratifying because it emphasized the technical sophistication of our work rather than just the commercial success. The recognition from industry publications had led to advisory opportunities with technology, incubators, venture capital firms, and academic institutions that were interested in my perspectives on innovation and entrepreneurship. These roles provided opportunities to influence the development of the next generation of technology companies, while staying current with emerging trends and breakthrough research. The advisory work was time-consuming but intellectually stimulating, and it helped maintain my connection to the broader technology community beyond the specific markets where quantum analytics operated. The third anniversary of leaving Austin had passed without any deliberate acknowledgement, but it had prompted reflection on how dramatically my life had changed during that period. 3 years earlier, I had been a heartbroken and betrayed employee driving toward Denver with no clear plan beyond escaping the people who had stolen my work. Now I was leading a successful technology company with international operations, a passionate relationship with someone who genuinely supported my ambitions, and recognition as an innovator who was contributing to meaningful advances in multiple industries. The personal transformation had been as significant as the professional achievements. The insecurity and self-doubt that had characterized my relationship with Marcus had been replaced by confidence in my abilities and judgment. The isolation and vulnerability I had felt after the betrayal had evolved into a strong network of professional relationships and personal friendships built on mutual respect and shared values. Most importantly, the anger and desire for revenge that had initially motivated my departure from Austin had transformed into gratitude for opportunities and determination to continue building something valuable. Ryan had been instrumental in helping me recognize and appreciate the positive aspects of my journey rather than remaining focused on the injustices that had initiated it. His perspective on resilience and growth had influenced my understanding of how setbacks could become foundations for greater achievements if approached with the right mindset and strategies. The relationship we had built was based on partnership and mutual support, rather than the power dynamics and hidden agendas that had characterized my experience with Marcus. The success of quantum analytics had created financial security that allowed me to pursue opportunities based on their potential impact rather than just their revenue generation. We had established a research division that worked on projects with longer development timelines but greater potential for breakthrough innovations. The research team was exploring applications of predictive analytics to challenges like climate change mitigation, medical diagnosis, and educational optimization that could benefit society while also creating new market opportunities. The climate change applications were particularly exciting because they represented opportunities to contribute to solutions for one of the most significant challenges facing humanity. We were working with environmental research institutions to develop predictive models that could help governments and organizations anticipate and prepare for the effects of changing weather patterns, rising sea levels, and shifting agricultural conditions. The work was technically challenging, but personally meaningful because it connected my expertise to objectives that extended far beyond commercial success. The medical diagnosis applications were equally compelling because they had the potential to improve healthcare outcomes while reducing costs for patients and medical systems. We were collaborating with hospitals and medical schools to develop algorithms that could help doctors identify patterns in patient data that might indicate early stages of diseases or predict which patients were most likely to experience complications from specific treatments. The healthcare applications required navigating complex regulatory frameworks, but the potential benefits justified the additional compliance requirements. The educational applications represented opportunities to help students and teachers optimize learning processes through better understanding of how individuals acquire and retain knowledge. We were working with universities and school districts to develop systems that could predict which students might struggle with specific concepts and recommend personalized approaches to instruction that could improve outcomes. The education sector was particularly rewarding to work with because improvements in learning could have positive effects that lasted throughout students' lives. The diversity of applications we were pursuing reflected the versatility of the adaptive learning principles that formed the foundation of quantum predict. The same core concepts that made the algorithm effective for financial market prediction were equally valuable for understanding patterns in medical data, environmental systems, or educational processes. This flexibility had been one of the key advantages that distinguished Quantum Predict from more specialized solutions that could only address specific types of prediction challenges. The technical team at Quantum Analytics had grown to include some of the most talented algorithm developers and data scientists in the industry. Many of our senior employees had been recruited from major technology companies where they had become frustrated with bureaucratic constraints and limited opportunities for innovation. The culture we had established attracted people who were motivated by challenging technical problems and meaningful applications rather than just financial compensation or corporate prestige. The collaborative environment at Quantum Analytics had fostered innovations that wouldn't have been possible in more hierarchical organizations, where information and opportunities were controlled by senior executives. Our best breakthrough ideas often came from junior team members who brought fresh perspectives to complex problems, and we had structured our development processes to ensure that good ideas could be pursued regardless of their source. This approach had accelerated our innovation while creating a workplace where people felt valued and empowered to contribute their best work. The equity sharing program had ensured that key employees were financially invested in the company's long-term success rather than just their individual compensation. This alignment of interests had reduced turnover while encouraging people to think strategically about decisions that affected the entire organization. Many of our employees had become wealthy as the company's valuation increased, creating a sense of shared achievement that strengthened team cohesion and commitment to continued growth. The work-life balance at Quantum Analytics was deliberately different from the exhausting pace that characterized many technology companies. While we worked hard during critical project phases, we also recognized that sustained innovation required time for reflection, learning, and personal renewal. The flexible schedules and generous vacation policies had actually improved productivity by reducing burnout and maintaining the intellectual energy necessary for creative problem-solving. The company culture had attracted attention from business, schools, and management consultants who were interested in understanding how we had built such an effective organization in a relatively short period. Several case studies had been written about our management practices and organizational structure, focusing on how we had created an environment that fostered both innovation and commercial success. The recognition was gratifying, but more importantly, it provided opportunities to influence how other companies approached talent development and organizational design. The success of quantum analytics had created opportunities to invest in other early-stage technology companies that were developing innovative solutions to complex problems. We had established a venture capital fund that focused specifically on startups led by entrepreneurs who had been underestimated or excluded from traditional funding networks. The investment activities were generating financial returns while also supporting the development of technologies that could have positive social impact. The venture capital activities had provided insights into emerging trends and breakthrough technologies that could influence the future direction of quantum analytics. Many of the companies we invested in were working on problems that could eventually benefit from predictive analytics applications, creating potential partnerships and market opportunities. The investment relationships also provided access to talented entrepreneurs and researchers who might eventually join our team or collaborate on joint projects. The fourth year of quantum analytics had begun with the most ambitious project in the company's history, developing a comprehensive predictive analytics platform that could be rapidly customized for any industry or application. The universal prediction engine would incorporate all the specialized knowledge we had gained from working in healthcare, finance, manufacturing, logistics, sustainability, and other sectors. Instead of requiring separate implementations for different use cases, the new platform would be able to adapt automatically to new data types and prediction requirements. The universal prediction engine represented the logical evolution of everything. We had learned about adaptive algorithms and industry-specific requirements. It would be able to recognize patterns and relationships in any type of structured data, develop appropriate prediction models, and continuously improve its performance based on feedback and new information. The technical challenges were substantial, but the potential applications were virtually limitless. The development timeline for the Universal Prediction Engine was projected to be 18 months, requiring the combined expertise of our entire technical team, plus additional specialists. In advanced machine learning and artificial intelligence, the project would represent the largest investment in research and development that quantum analytics had ever undertaken, but successful completion would establish us as the definitive leader in predictive analytics technology. The news about NeuroTech's continued struggles had reached me through industry contacts who were aware of my previous connection to the company. Despite the improved performance they had achieved through licensing Quantum Predict, they were having difficulty competing with newer entrants in the predictive analytics market who were developing innovative approaches that went beyond traditional financial applications. Their dependence on licensed technology had become a strategic weakness because they couldn't innovate independently or differentiate their offerings from competitors who had access to similar capabilities. Marcus had reached out several times over the past year with increasingly desperate requests for consulting assistance and enhanced licensing agreements. Each conversation revealed more details about their declining market position and internal conflicts over strategic direction. The irony of their situation was perfect. They had stolen my work because they believed I wasn't qualified to manage it, but now they couldn't succeed without my continued help. Their theft had ultimately trapped them in a dependency relationship with the person they had betrayed. The temptation to gloat over NeuroTech's struggles was strong, but I had come to understand that their failures were less important than my own success. The satisfaction I derived from building quantum analytics into an industry leader was far greater than any pleasure I might have gained from watching them struggle with problems of their own creation. The best revenge had indeed been building, something better than what they had stolen, and now I was focused on continuing to innovate rather than dwelling on past injustices. The opportunity to acquire NeuroTech had been presented by an investment banker who was aware of both companies' histories and thought the combination might create synergies. The financial terms would have been favorable because NeuroTech's valuation had declined significantly as their competitive position weakened. However, after careful consideration, Ryan and I had decided that acquiring them would be a distraction from our core objectives and might introduce cultural problems that could undermine what we had built at Quantum Analytics. Instead of pursuing acquisition, we had decided to continue competing with NeuroTech through superior technology and better Customer service. The market would ultimately determine which approach was more valuable, and we were confident that our commitment to innovation and customer success would prevail over their business model based on licensed technology and inherited relationships. The competition was motivating rather than concerning because we understood our advantages and were committed to maintaining them through continued improvement. The notification that arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September would mark the beginning of the most significant confrontation of my professional life. Dylan Cross had personally reached out through our corporate communications channel, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss what he described as a strategic opportunity that could benefit both organizations. The formal language couldn't disguise the underlying desperation in his message. NeuroTech was facing an existential crisis, and they needed something from quantum analytics that went far beyond the licensing agreements we had previously negotiated. The meeting request had come at a time when quantum analytics was experiencing unprecedented growth and recognition. Our universal prediction engine was nearing completion, with beta testing results that exceeded our most optimistic projections. The platform could adapt to new data types and prediction challenges with minimal configuration, making it possible to deploy sophisticated analytics solutions in a fraction of the time required by traditional approaches. Early client demonstrations had generated intense interest from companies across multiple industries who recognized the revolutionary potential of truly adaptive predictive analytics. Industry analysts were beginning to describe quantum analytics as the most innovative company in the predictive analytics space, with technology that represented a fundamental breakthrough rather than just an incremental improvement over existing solutions. The recognition was gratifying, but it also intensified the pressure to maintain our competitive advantages while scaling to meet growing demand. Every successful project and positive media mention attracted attention from competitors, who were trying to understand and replicate our approach to algorithm development. The timing of Dylan's outreach was particularly interesting because it coincided with several major announcements that had highlighted the contrasting trajectories of our two companies. Quantum Analytics had just secured a partnership with the European Union to develop predictive analytics systems for climate change mitigation, a prestigious contract worth over $50 million that positioned us as a global leader in technology applications for environmental sustainability. Meanwhile, industry publications were reporting that NeuroTech had lost two major clients who had decided not to renew their contracts due to dissatisfaction with system performance and support quality. The decision about whether to meet with Dylan had required careful consideration of both the potential opportunities and the possible risks. Ryan had been skeptical about the value of engaging with NeuroTech given their history of unethical behavior and their current state of obvious desperation. "They've proven that they can't be trusted," he had argued during our strategy discussion. "Any deal they propose will be structured to benefit them more than us, and they'll probably try to steal whatever intellectual property they can access during negotiations." His concerns were valid based on their past behavior, but I was curious about what they might be willing to offer in exchange for the help they clearly needed. Kai Patel had offered a different perspective that focused on the strategic advantages of understanding NeuroTech's situation more completely. "Even if we don't ultimately agree to any partnership or deal," he had pointed out, "the meeting could provide valuable intelligence about their current capabilities and strategic direction. If they're struggling as much as industry reports suggest, we should understand how that affects the competitive landscape and what opportunities might emerge for us." His analysis emphasized the information value of the meeting rather than just the potential for beneficial agreements. Elena Rodriguez had been particularly interested in the legal and financial implications of NeuroTech's apparent difficulties. "If they're facing serious financial problems," she had observed, "there might be opportunities to acquire specific assets or talent that could strengthen our position without taking on their operational liabilities. Their client relationships and intellectual property might be valuable even if their overall business model isn't sustainable." Her background in financial services had provided insights into how distressed companies often created acquisition opportunities for stronger competitors The venue Dylan had suggested for our meeting was itself revealing about NeuroTech's current situation. Instead of proposing to meet at their Austin headquarters, he had requested a neutral location in Dallas that would be convenient for both parties. The choice suggested that he didn't want this conversation to take place where his employees or board members might observe or overhear sensitive discussions. The secrecy implied that whatever he wanted to discuss wasn't supported by consensus within his organization. Preparing for the meeting had required research into NeuroTech's current financial position and strategic challenges. Public filings and industry reports painted a picture of a company that was struggling to maintain its market position despite the temporary improvements that had resulted from licensing quantum predict technology. Their revenue growth had stagnated as competitors developed more innovative solutions, and their profitability was declining due to increased customer acquisition costs and higher employee turnover rates. The most concerning development for NeuroTech was the emergence of several new companies that were developing predictive analytics solutions specifically designed to compete with their approach to financial market prediction. These startups were founded by former employees from major investment firms who understood client needs and regulatory requirements, but weren't constrained by legacy technology platforms or established business relationships. They were offering more flexible and cost-effective solutions that were appealing to clients who had become frustrated with NeuroTech's limitations. Brennan's role within NeuroTech had apparently been diminished significantly over the past year. Industry contacts had indicated that he was no longer involved in strategic decision-making and was primarily focused on maintaining existing client relationships rather than developing new technology or business opportunities. The man who had once positioned himself as a visionary technology leader was now functioning essentially as a customer service manager for systems he didn't fully understand. His reduced influence within the company was both personally satisfying and strategically relevant, because it suggested that NeuroTech's technical leadership was weaker than it had been when they initially stole my work. Natalie Pierce had reportedly left NeuroTech 6 months earlier to join one of the competing startups that was developing innovative financial analytics solutions. Her departure had been described in industry publications as a significant loss for NeuroTech because she had been their primary technical expert on algorithm development and system integration. The irony of her situation was perfect. After stealing credit for my innovations, she had discovered that her reputation was based on technology she didn't actually understand, forcing her to start over with a new company, where her lack of genuine expertise would eventually be exposed. The flight to Dallas had provided time to finalize our negotiation strategy and prepare for whatever proposals Dylan might present. Ryan had decided to accompany me to the meeting, both to provide business expertise and to ensure that I had support if the conversation became confrontational or emotionally challenging. His presence would also signal that Quantum Analytics was a mature organization with sophisticated leadership, rather than just a solo entrepreneur who might be vulnerable to manipulation or intimidation. The hotel conference room where we met Dylan was elegant, but impersonal. Exactly the kind of neutral environment that people choose when they want to avoid any psychological advantages or disadvantages. Dylan arrived alone, which suggested that whatever he wanted to discuss was either highly confidential or potentially controversial within his organization. His appearance had changed noticeably since I had last seen him during the licensing agreement negotiations. He looked older and more stressed, with the kind of carefully controlled anxiety that executives develop when their companies are facing serious problems. His opening remarks confirmed what industry reports had suggested about NeuroTech's strategic difficulties. Quantum Analytics has established itself as the clear technology leader in predictive analytics, he began with the tone of someone acknowledging an uncomfortable truth. Your innovations have created competitive advantages that are difficult for other companies to match through conventional development approaches. We're interested in exploring partnership opportunities that could benefit both organizations while addressing some of the challenges we're facing in the current market environment. The careful language couldn't disguise the fact that this was essentially a surrender. The company that had stolen my work and dismissed my capabilities was now Acknowledging that they couldn't compete with what I had built independently, Dylan was requesting partnership from a position of weakness, hoping that quantum analytics would be willing to provide assistance that could help NeuroTech survive the competitive pressures they were facing. His specific proposal was both audacious and desperate. NeuroTech wanted to merge with quantum analytics in a transaction that would combine our technology leadership with their existing client relationships and market presence. A merger would create synergies that neither company could achieve independently, Dylan explained, using the kind of corporate language that executives employ when they're trying to make bad ideas sound reasonable. Your technology combined with our established market position would create a dominant force in the predictive analytics industry. The merger proposal was structured in a way that would theoretically benefit both companies while addressing NeuroTech's most pressing problems. Quantum analytics would gain immediate access to major client relationships and established revenue streams that would accelerate our growth trajectory. NeuroTech would gain access to superior technology and innovative leadership that could restore their competitive position. The combined organization would have the scale and capabilities necessary to compete effectively with larger technology companies that were beginning to develop their own predictive analytics solutions. Ryan's response to the merger proposal was politely skeptical. "The strategic logic is interesting," he acknowledged diplomatically. "But we'd need to understand the financial and operational details before we could evaluate whether a merger would actually create value for both organizations. Our preliminary research suggests that NeuroTech is facing some significant challenges that might outweigh the potential benefits of combining our client bases and technology platforms." Dylan's reaction to Ryan's cautious response revealed the depth of NeuroTech's desperation. Instead of defending his company's position or challenging our assessment of their difficulties, he immediately began offering concessions that made it clear how badly they needed this deal to succeed. "We understand that quantum analytics is in a much stronger negotiating position," he admitted with obvious reluctance. "We'd be willing to structure the merger in a way that recognizes your superior technology and growth prospects. The leadership structure and equity distribution could reflect the relative contributions and future potential of both organizations." The specifics of his revised proposal were even more revealing about NeuroTech's situation. They were willing to accept a merger structure where quantum analytics would effectively be acquiring them rather than combining as equals. "I would become CEO of the merged organization, with Ryan serving as Chief Operating Officer and controlling significant equity positions. Dylan would remain as President of Client Relations, essentially managing existing customer relationships while having no input into technology development or strategic direction." The proposal represented almost complete capitulation by the company that had once dismissed me as unqualified to manage my own innovations. The financial terms Dylan presented were generous enough to warrant serious consideration. NeuroTech's existing contracts and client relationships were generating substantial revenue that would immediately increase quantum analytics' size and market presence. The combined organization would have the financial resources to accelerate development of the universal prediction engine while expanding into new markets more rapidly than either company could achieve independently. From a purely business perspective, the merger could create significant value while eliminating a potential competitor. However, the personal dynamics of the proposed merger were more complicated than the financial calculations. Working closely with Dylan would require overlooking his role in the theft of my original work and the deliberate destruction of my career at NeuroTech. While he had been less directly involved in the betrayal than Marcus or Natalie, he had been the ultimate decision-maker who had approved their actions and benefited from their success. Trusting him with any significant role in a merged organization would require a level of forgiveness and pragmatism that I wasn't certain I possessed. The discussion of Marcus's role in a potential merger had been particularly awkward. Dylan had initially suggested that Marcus would continue as Chief Technology Officer, reporting to me but maintaining responsibility for technical operations and client support. The proposal was absurd given Marcus's demonstrated inability to understand or improve the technology he had stolen, but it also revealed Dylan's complete misunderstanding of the personal dynamics involved. Having Marcus as a subordinate might seem like poetic justice, but it would also mean working closely with someone who had betrayed both my professional trust and personal affection. My response to the CTO proposal had been diplomatically firm. Marcus's expertise appears to be focused on maintaining existing systems rather than developing innovative solutions, I had observed carefully. A merged organization would need technical leadership that could advance our technology platform while ensuring seamless integration of existing client systems. We'd need to evaluate whether his skill set aligns with those requirements. The polite language conveyed my skepticism without explicitly stating that I would never again trust Marcus with any significant responsibility. Dylan's willingness to negotiate Marcus's role demonstrated how completely NeuroTech's power structure had shifted. The man who had once been positioned as their technical visionary was now expendable if that's what it took to secure a merger with quantum analytics. We're flexible about organizational structure and personnel decisions, Dylan had assured me. The most important thing is ensuring that the merged organization has the leadership and capabilities necessary for long-term success. The conversation had gradually revealed the extent of NeuroTech's financial difficulties. While they were still generating revenue from existing contracts, their client acquisition costs had increased dramatically as competitors offered more attractive alternatives. Their dependence on licensed technology was becoming a strategic liability because clients were beginning to prefer companies that controlled their own innovations and could provide more responsive support and customization. The licensing fees they were paying to quantum analytics were reducing their profit margins while highlighting their inability to innovate independently. More significantly, several of their major clients were demanding technology enhancements and customizations that NeuroTech couldn't provide without additional licensing agreements or consulting services from quantum analytics. The clients were becoming frustrated with NeuroTech's limitations and were actively evaluating alternative vendors who could provide more comprehensive solutions. Dylan estimated that they could lose up to 40% of their revenue within the next 18 months if they couldn't resolve these competitive disadvantages. The merger proposal was essentially NeuroTech's attempt to solve their strategic problems by gaining permanent access to quantum analytics technology and leadership, rather than continuing to pay licensing fees for limited usage rights. From their perspective, the merger would transform a costly dependency relationship into a competitive advantage that could help them regain market leadership. From our perspective, the merger would provide immediate scale and revenue while eliminating a potential competitor who might otherwise continue to struggle indefinitely. Ryan had requested a break in the negotiations to discuss our position. Privately, the financial terms are attractive, he had acknowledged once we were alone. But we need to consider whether we want to take on their operational problems and cultural challenges. Merging with a company that's built around stolen technology and unethical leadership practices could undermine everything we've worked to build at Quantum Analytics. His concerns reflected the values-based approach to business that had been fundamental to our success. The cultural integration challenges were indeed significant. Quantum Analytics had been built around principles of collaboration, transparency, and genuine recognition of individual contributions. NeuroTech's culture was apparently characterized by internal competition, credit theft, and leadership decisions based on personal relationships rather than merit. Combining these incompatible approaches to business could create conflicts that would reduce productivity while demoralizing employees who had joined Quantum Analytics specifically because of our organizational values. The talent retention issues were equally concerning. Many of our best employees had chosen Quantum Analytics over opportunities with larger, more established companies because they valued our innovative culture and equitable treatment. A merger with NeuroTech could prompt key team members to seek other opportunities rather than working for an organization that included people who had built their careers on intellectual property theft. Losing talented employees would undermine our competitive advantages while strengthening competitors who could recruit our former team members. After careful consideration, we had returned to the negotiation with a counterproposal that addressed our concerns while potentially providing benefits for both organizations. Instead of a traditional merger, we proposed that Quantum Analytics would acquire NeuroTech's client contracts and selected personnel, while NeuroTech would essentially cease operations as an independent company. The acquisition would eliminate their competitive pressures while providing us with immediate revenue growth and market expansion opportunities. The acquisition structure would allow us to retain control over cultural and operational decisions, while gaining access to established client relationships that could accelerate our growth. NeuroTech's employees would be evaluated individually for potential positions within Quantum Analytics based on their skills and cultural fit, rather than their previous roles or seniority. The approach would ensure that we could capture the valuable aspects of NeuroTech's business while avoiding the organizational problems that had contributed to their decline. Dylan's reaction to our counterproposal had been disappointed, but not entirely surprised. He had apparently hoped that a merger structure would allow him to maintain a significant leadership role while solving NeuroTech's problems. But he understood that Quantum Analytics held all the negotiating leverage. Your proposal would essentially end NeuroTech as an independent company, he had observed accurately. While the financial terms are fair, it represents the end of everything we've built over the past several years. The conversation had become more personal as Dylan reflected on the mistakes that had led to NeuroTech's current situation. We underestimated your capabilities when you were working for us, he had admitted with obvious regret. The decision to terminate your employment was based on assumptions about experience and leadership that proved to be completely wrong. If we had recognized your potential and treated you fairly, none of us would be in this situation now. His acknowledgement of their errors in judgment was gratifying, but it also raised questions about his motivations and sincerity. Dylan was clearly desperate to find a solution that would preserve his company and his own career, so his expressions of regret might have been strategic rather than genuine. However, the admission that they had been wrong about my capabilities represented a level of validation that I hadn't expected to receive from any of the people who had betrayed me. The discussion of what would happen to Marcus and Natalie in any potential deal had been illuminating. Dylan had revealed that Natalie's departure to a competing startup had been acrimonious, with disputes over intellectual property and client relationships that had resulted in legal threats from both sides. Her new employer was apparently struggling to deliver on promises they had made to clients, partly because Natalie's expertise was less substantial than her reputation suggested. The predictable failure of her attempt to replicate her NeuroTech success was satisfying confirmation that competence couldn't be faked indefinitely. Marcus's situation was more pathetic than satisfying. According to Dylan, he had become increasingly isolated within NeuroTech as his inability to improve or even maintain their technology platform became apparent. Client complaints about system performance and support quality were often directed specifically at Marcus, who was supposed to be their technical leader, but couldn't provide the expertise that clients expected. His reputation in the industry had declined significantly, making it unlikely that he could find a comparable position with another company. The revelation that Marcus was essentially trapped at NeuroTech because of his diminished reputation provided an unexpected perspective on the consequences of intellectual property theft. While he had initially benefited from taking credit for my work, his inability to build on that foundation had eventually exposed his limitations. The professional advantages he had gained through betrayal had proven to be temporary, while the damage to his integrity and credibility was permanent. His current situation demonstrated that success built on stolen innovation was ultimately unsustainable. The negotiation had concluded with an agreement to conduct detailed due diligence on both sides before finalizing any transaction. Quantum analytics would evaluate NeuroTech's financial position, client relationships, and operational challenges to determine whether an acquisition would actually create value for our organization. NeuroTech would review our growth projections and integration plans to ensure that their clients and employees would be treated fairly in any combined organization. The due diligence process would take approximately 6 weeks, during which both companies would continue operating independently while exploring the potential benefits and risks of various transaction structures. Dylan had agreed to provide complete transparency about NeuroTech's financial situation and client relationships, recognizing that any attempt to conceal problems would undermine the negotiation and damage what remained of his credibility. The thorough evaluation would ensure that any final agreement was based on accurate information, rather than optimistic projections or hidden liabilities. Ryan and I had returned to Denver with mixed feelings about the potential acquisition. The financial opportunity was substantial and could accelerate quantum analytics growth, while eliminating a competitor who might otherwise continue to struggle indefinitely. However, the personal dynamics were complex, involving people who had betrayed my trust and built their careers on stolen innovation. The decision about whether to proceed would require balancing pragmatic business considerations against values-based concerns about working with unethical individuals. The due diligence process had revealed the full extent of NeuroTech's decline over the past 2 years. Their client satisfaction scores had dropped significantly as system performance problems became more frequent and support quality deteriorated. Several major clients were actively evaluating alternative vendors and had indicated that they would not renew their contracts unless substantial improvements were made immediately. The revenue projections that Dylan had presented during our initial meeting were optimistic to the point of being misleading. More concerning were the operational problems that had resulted from high employee turnover and declining morale. Many of NeuroTech's most talented developers and analysts had left for other opportunities, taking valuable knowledge and client relationships with them. The remaining staff were reportedly demoralized by the company's struggles and uncertain about their long-term career prospects. The brain drain had created a vicious cycle where declining capabilities led to client dissatisfaction, which led to revenue problems, which led to more talented employees seeking other opportunities. The legal review had identified several potential liabilities that could affect any acquisition transaction. NeuroTech was facing litigation from 2 former employees who claimed that their contributions to algorithm development had not been properly recognized or compensated. While the cases might ultimately be resolved in NeuroTech's favor, they highlighted ongoing problems with how the company managed intellectual property and employee relations. The legal uncertainties could create additional costs and complications that would reduce the value of any acquisition. Most significantly, the technical evaluation had confirmed that NeuroTech's current algorithm implementation was indeed inferior to what quantum analytics had developed independently. Their modifications to the original predictive flow system had introduced limitations and instabilities that were affecting client outcomes. The problem wasn't just that they couldn't improve the technology, they had actually made it worse through misguided attempts at enhancement. Any acquisition would require essentially rebuilding their technical infrastructure using quantum analytics' superior platforms. The employee interviews that were conducted as part of the due diligence process had provided insights into NeuroTech's internal culture and management practices. Many staff members expressed frustration with leadership decisions that prioritized short-term revenue over long-term sustainability. Several people specifically mentioned concerns about ethical standards and transparency, suggesting that the problems that had led to my termination were part of a broader pattern of questionable behavior. The most revealing conversations had been with NeuroTech employees who had worked on the original predictive flow project and understood the circumstances of my departure. Several people had expressed regret about how I had been treated and acknowledged that the company's subsequent struggles were partly due to losing my expertise and innovative capabilities. Their comments confirmed that my termination had been viewed as a mistake by many people within the organization, even if they hadn't been in positions to influence the decision at the time. The financial analysis had concluded that acquiring NeuroTech's client contracts could be valuable despite the operational problems that would need to be resolved. The existing revenue streams would provide immediate cash flow while we transitioned clients to superior technology platforms. However, the acquisition price would need to reflect the substantial costs of fixing their technical problems and rebuilding client confidence in the service quality. The strategic assessment had identified both opportunities and risks associated with eliminating NeuroTech as a competitor. While their current struggles suggested that they would eventually fail without external assistance, their client relationships and market presence could potentially be acquired by other companies that might pose more serious competitive threats. Acquiring them ourselves would prevent competitors from gaining access to their assets while providing us with immediate market expansion opportunities. The decision about whether to proceed with the acquisition had required extensive discussion among Quantum Analytics' leadership team and board of advisors. The financial benefits were clear, but the cultural and operational challenges were significant. Ultimately, we had concluded that the acquisition could be beneficial if structured properly and executed carefully, but it would require substantial changes to NeuroTech's personnel and operations. The final acquisition proposal we presented to Dylan was substantially different from his original merger concept. Quantum Analytics would acquire NeuroTech's client contracts, intellectual property, and selected assets for a price that reflected their actual value rather than their historical significance. Most NeuroTech employees would be terminated as part of the acquisition, with a small number of individuals being offered positions based on their skills and cultural compatibility. Dylan would receive a consulting role that provided financial compensation while acknowledging that his operational responsibilities would be limited. The proposal essentially offered NeuroTech a dignified exit from an unsustainable situation while providing Quantum Analytics with immediate growth opportunities. The financial terms were fair, given NeuroTech's actual condition, but they represented a fraction of what the company had once been worth. The structure recognized that most of NeuroTech's apparent value had been based on technology they didn't actually control and competitive advantages they couldn't maintain. Dylan's acceptance of our proposal had been inevitable given his lack of alternatives. The company he had built was failing despite his efforts to save it, and our offer provided the best possible outcome for shareholders and employees who would otherwise face complete loss. His agreement to the terms represented final acknowledgement that Quantum Analytics had achieved superiority in every aspect of business that mattered for long-term success. The public announcement of the acquisition had generated significant attention within the tech industry, both because of the companies involved and because of the unusual circumstances that had led to the transaction. Industry analysts described the deal as evidence of Quantum Analytics' emergence as a dominant force in predictive analytics, while noting that NeuroTech's decline demonstrated the risks of building a business around technology that a company didn't fully understand or control. The integration process had proceeded smoothly because we had anticipated most of the challenges and prepared comprehensive plans for addressing them. The NeuroTech clients who were retained were generally pleased with the improved service quality and enhanced technology capabilities that resulted from the transition. The few employees who were offered positions at Quantum Analytics had adapted well to our collaborative culture and were contributing effectively to ongoing projects. Brennan had not been offered a position in the merged organization. His departure from the tech industry had been quiet and unremarkable, with no fanfare or recognition of his previous role in algorithm development. The man who had once positioned himself as a technology visionary was now working in corporate consulting, helping other companies with basic system implementations that didn't require innovative thinking or technical leadership. His career trajectory illustrated the long-term consequences of building professional success on dishonesty and theft, rather than genuine expertise and contribution. The completion of the NeuroTech acquisition marked a watershed moment that transformed both my personal understanding of success and quantum analytics' position within the technology industry. 6 months after finalizing the deal, we had successfully integrated their most valuable client relationships while eliminating the operational inefficiencies that had contributed to their decline. The combined organization was generating over $40 million in annual revenue, with growth projections that positioned us among the fastest expanding companies in the predictive analytics sector. The Universal Prediction Engine had launched 3 months ahead of schedule, leveraging resources and market insights gained through the acquisition to accelerate development and testing. The platform's ability to adapt automatically to new data types and prediction requirements was generating unprecedented interest from enterprise clients who had previously been constrained by the limitations of specialized analytics tools. Early implementations were achieving accuracy improvements of 20 to 30% compared to traditional solutions, while reducing deployment time from months to weeks. The market response to the Universal Prediction Engine had exceeded our most optimistic projections. Within 60 days of launch, we had received implementation requests from over 200 companies across 15 different industries. The demand was so intense that we had to establish a waiting list for new clients while expanding our technical support and consulting teams to handle the volume of interest. The success validated our strategic vision while creating opportunities for sustained growth that would cement our leadership position for years to come. Ryan and I had celebrated the Universal Prediction Engine launch with a private dinner at the restaurant where we had shared our first meal together as business partners 4 years earlier. The setting provided a perfect opportunity to reflect on the remarkable journey that had transformed both of our lives and created something far more significant than either of us could have achieved independently. "When I first met you," Ryan had observed, "I thought I was hiring a consultant to solve maintenance prediction problems. I never imagined I was meeting the person who would become my partner in building something revolutionary." The conversation that evening had naturally turned to future possibilities and the choices we would make as quantum analytics continued to grow and evolve. The success we had achieved created options that hadn't existed during the early years of struggle and uncertainty. We could pursue aggressive expansion that would maximize our market dominance, or we could focus on selective growth that preserved the innovative culture and collaborative relationships that had made our success possible. The decisions we made would determine not just the company's trajectory, but also the kind of leaders we would become. The acquisition had also created an opportunity to address unfinished business with the people who had shaped my professional journey in ways both positive and negative. Marcus Brennan had reached out through a mutual contact, requesting a meeting to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. His message had been carefully worded to avoid any appearance of desperation, but the subtext was clear. His career had stagnated since leaving NeuroTech, and he was hoping that our previous relationship might create opportunities for consulting work or employment. The decision about whether to meet with Marcus had required careful consideration of both practical and emotional factors. From a business perspective, there was no compelling reason to engage with someone whose competence and integrity had been thoroughly discredited. From a personal perspective, however, the meeting might provide closure on a relationship that had influenced my understanding of trust, ambition, and professional ethics. After discussing the situation with Ryan, I had agreed to a brief coffee meeting that would allow Marcus to present whatever proposal he had in mind. The coffee shop Marcus had chosen for our meeting was deliberately casual and public, presumably to create an environment where he might seem less threatening and more sympathetic. His appearance had changed dramatically since our last encounter, during the licensing negotiations. The confident executive presence had been replaced by the careful demeanor of someone who understood that he was requesting favors from a position of weakness. The silver hair that had once suggested distinguished experience now seemed to emphasize his age and declining relevance in a rapidly evolving industry. His opening remarks had combined acknowledgement of past mistakes with subtle attempts to reframe our relationship in ways that might create opportunities for future collaboration. I've had a lot of time to think about the decisions we made at NeuroTech, he had begun carefully, and I realize that we failed to recognize the full extent of your capabilities and contributions. The success you've achieved with quantum analytics demonstrates the kind of vision and leadership that we should have supported rather than undermining. The apology was more comprehensive than I had expected, but it also felt calculated rather than genuine. Marcus was clearly hoping that expressing regret would create openings for discussion about potential business opportunities. His acknowledgement of my capabilities was gratifying, but it also highlighted the self-serving nature of his current outreach. He hadn't contacted me to make amends for past wrongs. He was seeking assistance because his career had reached a dead end. His specific request had been both predictable and pathetic. Marcus wanted to join quantum analytics as a senior consultant who could help manage client relationships and provide strategic guidance based on his years of experience in the technology industry. He emphasized his knowledge of enterprise sales, processes, and his existing relationships with potential clients who might be interested in our services. The proposal was essentially asking me to rescue his career by providing him with a platform to rebuild his professional reputation. My response had been politely but firmly negative. "I appreciate your interest in quantum analytics," I had replied, diplomatically, "but our current team structure doesn't include positions that would be appropriate for someone with your background and experience level. We're focused on building our capabilities through people who can contribute directly to algorithm development and technical implementation rather than traditional consulting or sales roles." The rejection was clear while avoiding any explicit reference to the trust issues that made collaboration impossible. Marcus's reaction to my refusal had revealed the desperation underlying his carefully composed presentation. Instead of accepting the decision gracefully, he had attempted to leverage our personal history and his knowledge of my early career challenges. "I understand that my involvement in your departure from NeuroTech created complications," he had acknowledged with obvious reluctance. "But I hope you can recognize that those decisions were made in a corporate context that didn't reflect my personal feelings about your abilities or potential. I've always believed in your talent, even when circumstances required me to support different strategic directions." The attempt to rewrite history was insulting in its transparent dishonesty. Marcus was trying to position himself as someone who had privately supported me while being forced to publicly participate in my betrayal. The narrative was designed to absolve him of responsibility while creating a foundation for renewed relationship based on his alleged recognition of my worth. His willingness to distort the truth so blatantly confirmed that he hadn't changed fundamentally, despite the career setbacks he had experienced. "I think we remember those circumstances differently," I had replied evenly, refusing to engage with his revisionist interpretation of events. The decisions that were made reflected the values and priorities of everyone involved. I've moved forward based on what I learned from that experience, and I think it's best for both of us to continue focusing on our separate paths. The response had been final enough to end the conversation while maintaining professional courtesy. The encounter with Marcus had been emotionally satisfying in ways I hadn't anticipated. Seeing him reduced to requesting help from someone he had betrayed provided a form of vindication that was more complete than any business success could have achieved. However, the satisfaction was tempered by recognition that his downfall hadn't actually contributed to my achievements. The success of quantum analytics was based on innovation, determination, and authentic relationships, rather than on the failure of people who had wronged me. The contrast between Marcus's desperate situation and my own position of strength had highlighted how dramatically the balance of power had shifted since my termination from NeuroTech. 4 years earlier, he had been the established executive who controlled my career prospects and dismissed my capabilities. Now he was an unemployed consultant, seeking assistance from the person he had underestimated and betrayed. The reversal was complete and irreversible, providing closure that legal victory or financial compensation could never have achieved. More importantly, The meeting had confirmed that my decision to focus on building something better, rather than seeking revenge, had been strategically and emotionally correct. If I had spent the past 4 years pursuing legal action or attempting to expose NeuroTech's unethical practices, I might have achieved some form of justice, but would have missed the opportunities that led to creating quantum analytics. The energy I had invested in innovation and growth had generated returns that exceeded any satisfaction I might have gained from punishing my betrayers. The personal growth that had accompanied my professional success was perhaps the most significant transformation of all. The insecurity and self-doubt that had characterized my early career had been replaced by genuine confidence in my abilities and judgment. The tendency to seek validation from others had evolved into self-reliance and independence that couldn't be undermined by criticism or rejection. Most importantly, the bitter anger that had initially motivated my departure from Austin had transformed into gratitude for experiences that had ultimately led to opportunities I never could have imagined. Ryan and I had decided to formalize our personal relationship through marriage during a private ceremony in the mountains outside Denver. The wedding had been small and intimate, reflecting our preference for authentic connection over public celebration. The vows we exchanged focused on partnership, mutual support, and shared commitment to building something meaningful together. The ceremony felt like a natural evolution of the relationship that had developed alongside our business collaboration. The honeymoon had provided our first extended break from work in over 3 years, allowing us to travel through Europe while visiting the London and potential Singapore office locations. The trip had combined personal celebration with strategic planning, as we met with international clients and explored expansion opportunities that could extend quantum analytics' influence into new markets. The balance between personal and professional activities reflected the integrated approach to life and work that had characterized our relationship from the beginning. Returning to Denver after the honeymoon, we had found that quantum analytics momentum had continued to accelerate during our absence. The management team we had developed was capable of handling day-to-day operations while maintaining the innovative culture and client focus that distinguished our organization. The success of our delegation efforts validated our approach to leadership development and organizational design, creating confidence that the company could continue growing without becoming dependent on any individual contributor. The 5-year anniversary of my departure from Austin provided an opportunity to reflect on the remarkable transformation that had occurred during that period. What had begun as a desperate flight from betrayal and professional destruction had evolved into the creation of something far more valuable than what had been stolen from me. Quantum analytics was now valued at over $200 million, with technology that was recognized as revolutionary, and a team that was regarded as the most innovative in the industry. The financial success was gratifying, but the personal satisfaction was even more significant. I had proven that intelligence, determination, and integrity could overcome betrayal and discrimination. The people who had dismissed my capabilities were now seeking assistance from the company I had built. The technology they had stolen had been surpassed by innovations they could never understand or replicate. The career they had tried to destroy had evolved into leadership of an organization that was changing entire industries. The impact of quantum analytics extended far beyond commercial success to include contributions that could benefit society as a whole. Our work on climate change prediction was helping governments and organizations prepare for environmental challenges while developing mitigation strategies that could reduce long-term damage. The healthcare applications were improving diagnostic accuracy while reducing treatment costs for patients and medical systems. The educational implementations were helping students achieve better learning outcomes while supporting teachers with more effective instructional approaches. The recognition that our work was contributing to solutions for significant societal challenges had transformed my understanding of professional purpose and responsibility. Success wasn't just about achieving financial prosperity or industry prominence. It was about using capabilities and resources to address problems that mattered for the welfare of others. The opportunity to make meaningful contributions while building a successful business represented the kind of integrated approach to career and values that I had always hoped to achieve. The speaking opportunities that accompanied my growing prominence had provided platforms to advocate for better treatment of innovators and more ethical corporate practices. While I still couldn't discuss the specific details of my experience with NeuroTech due to legal considerations, I could speak generally about the importance of protecting intellectual property and ensuring that credit for achievements goes to the people who actually deserve it. These presentations had generated positive responses from audiences who appreciated hearing from someone who had overcome significant setbacks to build something successful. The mentorship relationships I had developed with other entrepreneurs had been personally rewarding while contributing to the success of the next generation of technology leaders. Many of the founders I worked with had experienced some form of intellectual property theft or corporate betrayal, and they appreciated guidance from someone who had successfully navigated those challenges. The relationships had enriched my understanding of entrepreneurship, while helping other innovators avoid some of the mistakes and setbacks that had characterized my own journey. The venture capital activities had expanded beyond supporting individual startups to include advocacy for systemic changes that could better protect innovators from exploitation. We had worked with legal organizations and policy groups to develop stronger intellectual property protections and more effective remedies for inventors whose work had been appropriated by others. The efforts were beginning to influence legislation and corporate policies in ways that could prevent future incidents like what I had experienced at NeuroTech. The expansion of quantum analytics into international markets had created opportunities to influence global approaches to predictive analytics while building relationships with innovators and organizations around the world. The London office had become a hub for European operations, generating substantial revenue while also contributing to research initiatives that were advancing the theoretical foundations of machine learning and artificial intelligence. The Singapore office was serving a similar role in Asian markets, creating partnerships with governments and companies that were pursuing innovative approaches to economic development and social policy. The success of our international operations had attracted attention from global technology leaders who were interested in collaboration opportunities that could benefit multiple organizations. We had established research partnerships with universities in 5 countries, joint development projects with companies in 8 different industries, and consulting relationships with government agencies that were pursuing ambitious technology initiatives. The international network was creating opportunities for knowledge sharing and innovation that extended far beyond what any single organization could achieve independently. The most recent development had been an offer from one of the world's largest technology companies to acquire quantum analytics for a price that would have made everyone associated with the company extremely wealthy. The offer had been financially attractive and strategically logical, but it had also raised fundamental questions about our objectives and values. Accepting the acquisition would have provided immediate financial rewards while potentially limiting our ability to pursue the innovative projects and social contributions that had become central to our mission. After extensive discussion with Ryan, our leadership team, and our board of advisors, we had decided to decline the acquisition offer and continue building quantum analytics as an independent organization. The decision reflected our commitment to maintaining control over strategic direction while preserving the innovative culture that had made our success possible. We wanted to continue pursuing opportunities that balanced commercial success with meaningful contributions to society, rather than simply maximizing short-term financial returns. The choice to remain independent had been supported enthusiastically by our employees, who valued the autonomy and creative freedom that characterized their work at Quantum Analytics. Many team members had joined specifically because they wanted to work for an organization that prioritized innovation and social impact over purely financial objectives. The decision to maintain our independence validated their choice, while ensuring that we could continue attracting the kind of talented, motivated people who had been essential to our achievements. Looking toward the future, the possibilities seemed limitless. The universal prediction engine was being adopted rapidly across multiple industries, creating revenue streams that would support continued growth and innovation. The international expansion was opening new markets while generating insights that were improving our technology and business practices. The research partnerships were contributing to scientific advances that could have benefits extending far beyond commercial applications. Most importantly, the foundation we had built was strong enough to support whatever challenges and opportunities might emerge in the rapidly evolving technology landscape. The team we had assembled combined technical excellence with collaborative values that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining the innovative culture that distinguished our organization. The financial resources we had accumulated provided security and flexibility for pursuing ambitious projects without compromising our independence or integrity. The personal relationship Ryan and I had built provided a foundation of mutual support and shared vision that could sustain us through whatever professional and personal challenges we might face in the future. Our partnership had proven successful in business, marriage, and the pursuit of meaningful contributions to society. The integration of our personal and professional lives had created a sense of purpose and fulfillment that exceeded anything either of us could have achieved independently. The journey from betrayed employee to industry leader had been marked by setbacks, struggles, and uncertainties that had tested every aspect of my character and capabilities. However, it had also provided opportunities for growth, achievement, and contribution that would have been impossible within the constraints of traditional corporate employment. The experience had taught me that the most devastating setbacks could become foundations for the greatest achievements if approached with the right combination of determination, innovation, and ethical commitment. The ultimate vindication had come not from the failure of people who had wronged me, but from the success of what I had built in response to their betrayal. Quantum analytics represented everything I had learned about leadership, innovation, and the importance of building authentic relationships based on mutual respect and shared values. The company was thriving, not because we had defeated competitors, but because we had created something genuinely valuable that served the needs of clients while contributing to the welfare of society. The story that had begun with theft and betrayal had evolved into one of resilience, innovation, and ultimate triumph. The algorithm they had stolen had been surpassed by technology they could never understand. The career they had tried to destroy had become more successful than anything they had achieved with my original work. The person they had dismissed as unqualified had become a leader whose innovations were changing entire industries. Standing in my office overlooking downtown Denver, surrounded by the evidence of everything we had built together, I realized that the greatest revenge had been no revenge at all. It had been the decision to focus on creation rather than destruction, on building something better rather than tearing down what had been taken from me. The success of quantum analytics was a testament to the power of innovation, determination, and integrity to overcome any obstacle and achieve any objective. The future stretched ahead with unlimited possibilities, supported by the knowledge that we had built something sustainable, meaningful, and genuinely valuable. Whatever challenges might emerge, we would face them with the confidence that comes from having transformed adversity into achievement and betrayal into the foundation for something extraordinary. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.